Welcome to another episode of CrafterCast, where we focus on specific topics related to modern content management for digital experience applications. Today's topic is ensuring web accessibility and Section 508 compliance. My name is Mike Fertel, and with me today here is Russ Danner. Let's start first by explaining what is Section 508. It's a U.S. federal law, and it refers to a section of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, if you believe that. It's a federal law that mandates that federal agencies create and use information technology that's accessible to people with disabilities. And the scope of what's covered is not only websites, but all types of software, documents, smartphone apps, etc. It applies not only to U.S. federal agencies and their departments, but also organizations that are doing business with U.S. federal agencies. And similarly, there's a Section 504, which applies in a similar fashion to entities that receive federal funding. So schools and universities, hospitals, nursing homes, and so forth fall under Section 504 and also are governed by these same types of principles and guidelines. And in general, for those not directly affected by U.S. federal regulations, it's just good business practice, right? So how do you make sure that your website, your mobile apps, and other web content can be accessed by everybody? Currently, the gold standard for web accessibility is what's called Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. WCAG is designed to align with legal requirements. And in fact, the latest refresh of Section 508 cites conformance with the second level of WCAG 2.0 as the standard of accessibility to which U.S. federal organizations must conform. So today we're really going to drill down on WCAG as a proxy for Section 508 compliance and other related government regulations. And we're going to talk about the 4 principles of WCAG and how CrafterCMS can help ensure that your sites and apps are accessible and 508 compliant. So Russ, let's talk about first how CrafterCMS supports or can support WCAG compliant websites.
Well, so in a nutshell, CrafterCMS is a headless platform and it allows you to build any type of experience using any front-end technology. So again, this doesn't just apply to websites, it applies to all kinds of different experiences because Crafter allows you to use any front-end framework and cover that full range of experiences in any kind of technology. And Crafter doesn't put any constraints on those front-end technologies. So all the standards are achievable through Crafter from a technical perspective. In addition to that, Crafter helps content authors create compliant content. And I think we can get into that as we go through the various principles.
Excellent. So now let's drill down into WCAG 2.0 in particular. It's composed of 4 main principles. Sites and apps must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And each of those principles has a set of guidelines associated with them that guide you as a web developer or as a content author in ensuring compliance. So let's start with the perceivable principle, right? And the guidelines associated with being perceivable. Perceivable generally means information and that the UI components must be presentable to users in a way that they can perceive, again, regardless of disability. And then we can walk through each of the guidelines for perceivable. So for text alternatives, the first guideline for under perceivable, it's to provide text alternatives for any non-text content. For example, non-text content would be images or video and so forth. So how does Crafter support that?
Well, Crafter's content modeling capability allows you to capture any amount of content and any amount of metadata for different types of assets that include, but are not limited to, things like images, videos, audio clips, and documents. So we can capture additional metadata and additional descriptions and so on for those types of assets. and make sure that they're available to present along with that asset.
Right. And then there's a guideline specifically for time-based content, time-based media, such as live and pre-recorded audio and video.
Right. So for those types of assets, Crafter is integrated with asset processing platforms like AWS Transcribe, which can produce closed caption alternatives for both video and audio assets.
Another guideline is that the content should be adaptable, that you should allow to create content that can be presented in different ways without losing information or structure.
Well, and that goes back to one of Crafter's first principles, which is being content first, and another first principle, which is being API first, and really making sure that we capture and store content in a presentationless way so that we can then later serve that content to a digital experience and let that digital experience display that content in the way that it's appropriate for that experience, and then appropriate in the context that we're discussing here, which is around accessibility in different layouts and formats that make sense for that particular use case.
And one final guideline is that the UI should be distinguishable, right? And make it easier for users to see and hear content, including separating foreground from background, for example.
So the key here is that Crafter gives a UX designers complete control over the presentation and the options for presentation, making it really easy to make sure that that content is distinguishable. And further, CrafterCMS's authoring tools provide a fully functional preview of these different experiences and these different scenarios that can take place within a particular experience, which means that they can test and confirm the accessibility through human testing and automated testing.
Excellent. So let's talk about the second principle, which is operable, that the user interface components and navigation must be operable to folks with any type of disability. And that means keyboard accessibility, that they have enough time to consume the content. There's no constraints on that. Seizures and physical reactions are eliminated. The site and content is navigable, and make it easier for users to operate functionality through various inputs beyond a keyboard. So how does Crafter support all that?
Yeah, so Crafter addresses these operable requirements in a very similar fashion to the perceivable requirements. Again, just to cover these again briefly, Crafter's content modeling gives the ability to require content capture and configuration to support the accessibility needs. Crafter is a headless platform that basically makes it possible to serve any kind of content to any front end for any type of experience. So it really puts the capability of meeting these requirements in the hands of the designers and the developers or who are putting these applications together. It makes it much easier for them to reach these accessibility goals because they have the proper tools, the proper framework, and the proper tool chain to achieve the goals. And CrafterCMS's preview platform gives authors and testers, both human and automated, the ability to certify the accessibility compliance.
So now on to the third principle, which is understandable, that the information and the operation of the UI must be understandable to people with any type of disability. The first guideline there is make textual content readable and understandable.
So readability at its heart is really an editorial concern. That's going to come down to the content authors thinking about their audience, knowing their audience, and so on, and making sure that concern is covered. But Crafter is very easily integrated with copy analysis platforms like Grammarly to help ensure that the content is written in an accessible manner. So I think it's one of the things that we see as we move forward here is a lot of tools that leverage natural language processing to help authors ensure that they are speaking in an appropriate manner for their audience.
And the next guideline associated with the understandable principle is that the content should be predictable, make web pages appear and operate in predictable ways.
Right. And that again comes down to how the experience is constructed. And the key here is that developers have full control over the markup, full control over the frameworks and how the pages and applications operate. And further, we offer a lot of examples and tutorials on various technologies such as Bootstrap and Vue and React and many others to help developers get started with frameworks that have been built with these kind of objectives in mind.
All right, and then we got the third and final guideline under the understandable principle, which is input assistance, helping users avoid and correct any mistakes.
Right, and this comes back to Crafter's content modeling capabilities and tools. So Crafter's content modeling tool supports rules and constraints, as well as integrations with external systems to help avoid and correct authoring mistakes.
All right, so that's the understandable principle. The final and fourth principle is robustness. Robust means content that can be interpreted by a wide variety of users, including those that are using assistive technologies. The one guideline under this principle is compatibility, that you want to maximize compatibility with current and future users, user proxies, user agents, including assistive technologies. How does Crafter support this principle?
Well, I think there are three key ways that we do that. The first is that Crafter puts no constraints on developers building experiences in CrafterCMS, as we've discussed. And this is great for meeting today's requirements and future requirements. Secondly, Crafter supports an unprecedented level of integration between the developers, content authors, and ops, and that creative process. So they're able to roll out new features and new experiences much faster. Thirdly, Crafter captures and stores content in a presentationless format. So while user agents come and go, much of our content is evergreen. And by separating the presentation from the content, that enables us to support new agents over time without having to start over from scratch and rewrite all of our content and recreate our content for those new types of agents.
Great. So that kind of wraps up the four principles and the underlying guidelines of WCAG 2.0 compliance and requirements. Again, the four principles are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robustness. Do you have a few words to say, Russ, on other capabilities of Crafter that helps authors, developers check for compliance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is where our plugin framework can be a huge help. Using the plugin framework, you can install text analysis tools, image analysis tools, compliance checkers, and so on. All of those things that can really help automate the testing of these experiences and make sure that you are compliant before you deploy.
So I think that's a good summary there and a good overview of how Crafter supports web accessibility and Section 508 compliance for those in the US. We know this from firsthand experience. We have clients in the US government, both civilian agencies and DoD defense agencies. We also have international governments that are running CrafterCMS for their public-facing applications and sites that are accessible to end users. So hope you all found this useful. And any questions, please leave us a note. Thanks everybody for watching. If you found this useful, hit the like button and share it with your friends and colleagues. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and so you don't miss any future episodes. And feel free to comment below on any topics you'd love to hear us talk about or hit us up over at CrafterCMS.com. Thanks for watching and have a great day.